Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week we're diving back into anime with what I would call an underrated show. Not too many people talk about it anymore. I don't even know if people talked about it when it came out. Not like, say, Big O or the upcoming, Cowboy Bebop sort of thing where everybody knows about it as far as anime goes. The show in question is Heat Guy J. The show debuted in 2003 on MTV2 of all stations. Now, for those who didn't have, before we had streaming services and, we had DVDs and, VHSs and things, but you remember when I talked about Big O, I had a big, just pile of VHS tapes. And when I would get into anime, I would tape, whether it be super late at night or in the weekends, things that I would watch. And there were channels that were devoted to anime that weren't Cartoon Network. Now, Toonami had the lion's share, of course, because Toonami, Adult Swim, and stuff like that. But other channels got in on it. I know G4 was one of the main hubs for that sort of thing. G4 Tech TV, they had Rasafon, which was a Eva knockoff, a pretty good one, and I'll talk about eventually. They had Magical Shopping Arcade, Abenobashi. I never get that pronunciation right. And then there were others. Of all stations to pick up anime, though, I was kind of shocked one day when I saw MTV2 on the weekends, like early morning or like late at night or whatever, would be playing the first season of this show. And I loved this. It's not the most amazing thing, but for the time, it was 2000, early to mid 2000s. So this was when they started doing CG a lot. And, because I would say from like right at the tail end of 2000, Japan started to do a lot of like CG animation. They would still do hand-drawn, and I don't know if this show was purely hand-drawn, purely CG. I don't think it was pure CG, though. It sure felt like a lot of CG. It almost reminded me of the 90s Spider-Man, though, way more in integral use of CG, because Spider-Man would only, use for the moving, the spider sense sequences, the battle sequences. It would be obvious CG, right? That sort of thing, where everything else was hand drawn, but then everything, you would know it right away when you see it when it was CG. This was a little more sophisticated because this came about 10 years later, so there's kind of a mix of hand drawn and just CG, but even like CG scanning, like maybe just use of CG to get all of the characters in view outside of just, oh, here's the android, here's the motorbike, here's all the action sequences, here's the obvious CG for these amazing, beautiful sky landscapes and stuff. But that was the thing that I also remembered. But I think what really got me was this was around the time, like 2 or 3 years into my anime fixation, and crime dramas and such weren't really my thing back then. I would just watch whatever was watching. I'd say Big O was one of the few that was doing that. Black Lagoon wasn't really a thing yet. Gangsta sure as hell wasn't, because that was like 2014, right? But things like Gungrave, Big O, Cowboy Bebop, which I ended up watching after this, but it's its own thing because it's like a crime drama, good cop, bad cop thing. But the hook of this show is that the main cop is a human, and then his partner is an android. And that was freaking cool, just seeing this giant, burly Terminator as a crime-solving, just kick-ass android. And I think the show suffers a little bit in how it tells that sort of story, because the presentation of the visual design, despite how gorgeous it looks, and even now, 20 years later, it's still very good to look at. The character models have just the big anime eye look, and distinctive faces, but they look very expressive. The issue is that because they do that, the show kind of suffers and stumbles when it comes to telling how dark and dystopic the crime drama stuff is, because there is a lot of it in there, and the dialogue is written and acted very well. But again, I do think that, as I will go over, there's a bit of a disconnect with some of it, and it doesn't add up to a completely amazing show, but it will. I'd say if people do watch it, it's still on Funimation, as they have the license. It's worth a watch, I think. And I will start by discussing the characters, because there are a lot of them, and most of them are really good, actually. We'll start with the main character. His name is Daisuke Aurora. He was voiced in the English version by Steve Staley, who I knew him mostly from Star Ocean 3 as the main character, Fate Line God. He was, the sort of like goofy surfer dude kind of voice. Like doesn't take things too seriously, but he has like, he can handle himself. That's the kind of person that Daisuke and the actor were, so they kind of fit together. And Daisuke's whole thing is he's part of the public safety division, and think of it almost like a Minority Report kind of thing. I don't think I ever saw a Minority Report, but the hook with that was they would investigate signs of crimes before future ones got committed. So if a crime got committed, they would be brought in as a special, like, sort of assassin, sort of detective, sort of private investigations unit in a branch of government that was loosely affiliated with the police. Not always affiliated. They were their own separate thing. But that allows them to have maneuverability, and Daisuke as a character is like, I'm too old for this shit. Which he's not. He's just the 25-year-old slacker dude type. But that's how he processes life, and which belies the fact that he's very well trained, and he's got like great martial arts skills. He's good with a gun, so he's good with all that stuff. And he's flanked by his partner Jay, voiced by Bob Pappenbrook, who was, oh god, he was in Great Teacher Onizuka as the principal. Oh god, when I get to GTO, that will be a conversation. But yeah, so they picked an older guy to voice the android. So again, think of a Terminator type. And again, think of just very stiff, but the way that he bounces off of Daisuke, who is just this slacker dude type, but he's almost philosophical. He was programmed to respond. He was programmed to interact with Daisuke and to other people on his own. So this is sort of advanced sci-fi kind of thing. More of the Terminator 2-esque banter between, back and forth. But Jay never comes across as the doofus, because Daisuke does that for him. And you have that benefit of anything that Daisuke can't really do. You just have Jay punch a dude or look up something on his database or something like that. So they work together as man and machine. Yeah, that's a trope, but it works in the show, and it's really what keeps it going. So their job is to investigate crimes and solve them, mostly involving heavy machinery, so Jay could punch a lot of things. The next character is Kyoko Milchan, voiced by Carrie Walgren, who, God, when that came out, she was in like 4 or 5 shows back then and doing all these different voices back then. But she was Haruko from Fooly Cooly. She was in Wolf's Rain as one of the main characters. She was Kyoko in this. She's been in Xenosaga. She's been in God knows how much stuff. And she was even, the character I forgot just now was Witch Hunter Robin. She was Robin in Witch Hunter Robin, that horror show from around the same time frame, about a witch. And she always played different character voices. In this, she's just the prissy, like, you guys are such idiots. That prissy type of person. So Kyoko comes across as, I'm just trying to do my job, and you guys are idiots. We don't have any money for these missions, but you keep screwing the shit up. So Kyoko sorta has a thing for Daisuke, even though she doesn't want to, that kind of thing. So she has a thing for his brother too. So she likes his brother, but there's a love triangle there, and they play off it. They don't like force the issue until later into the show, so it's not like a big deal. But Kyoko gets her moments. Again, the humor in the show is a bit stiff, so don't expect her to be. She's mostly the butt of a joke, but she'll have her moments where she's not so stupid. Like I mentioned, Daisuke has a brother, and if Daisuke is the slacker, then Shun Aurora is the I am too serious for this shit job, because he's the successful one. He runs the city safety management agency, and Shun is voiced by Lex Lang, who was in Rurouni Kenshin. I forget. Oh god, I should know this because I saw Rurouni Kenshin. He's the character in the white outfit with the giant fucking sword thing, like the secondary main awesome dude, other than Kenshin himself. I should know the name off the top of my head. That shows you what I don't remember. But yeah, if you ever saw Rurouni Kenshin, you've heard Lex Lang's voice, but he was in stuff like Dot Hack and whatever, so I know Lex as well. And again, you have the super slacker brother, you have the super serious brother, and Shun is like way taller, way more intimidating, sits behind a desk, but kicks the shit out of Daisuke to keep him in line, because why not? So there's a bit of a bickering back and forth. His secretary is awesome too. Her name is Phia, Phia, if I remember right. She's voiced by Karen Strassman, who Karen went on to do, oh god, Aigis from Persona 3, Nanako for Persona 4, Fee from Virtue's Last Reward. I mean, I could like name countless shows in the last 20 years. She's probably been in them. But yeah, Fia doesn't do a whole lot, but she's there just to act as a counterbalance to all the, the brotherly mistrust bullshit, and just laugh the entire time. And she actually gets a little bit more into the second season. I'm trying not to spoil the show, unless I really, really need to, because sometimes I dive heavy into spoilers. Sometimes I try to avoid them. This is one of those where you don't really need the spoilers for the end of mostly the end of the show, but there's not a whole bunch to worry about. But basically, Fia and Shun are dealing with Daisuke's bullshit all the time, but they also control the safety management agency, so they know that they could just flip on a switch and Jay goes nowhere, and then Daisuke is left to his own devices, which can happen. So as far as villains go, and we'll get back to minor characters in a minute, but the main character, as far as the villains go, is Claire Leonelli, voiced by Johnny Young Bosch. Hello, Vash the Stampede. How you doing? Vash the Stampede, Kiba from Wolf's Rain. Wasn't he the Black Ranger from Power Rangers? You've probably heard Johnny Young Bosch's voice in any video game or any anime from the last 20 years. I probably don't need to say anymore. This show, he plays a complete nutball. This spoiled rich kid of a mob boss's son. That's basically what Johnny Young Bosch has to do in this show, and he laughs his ass off. It gets I like it, but it gets a bit much because that's what he does. But at the same time, when he wants to, Claire will beat the shit out of other mob bosses. He will pull a gun on people. So his role is to run Company Vita. That's the official name of the mob. His title is of a vampire, and he, like I said, he was born into this. So think spoiled rich kid of Dracula's son. I mean, they're not vampires, but that's the technical term for the mob boss of all mob bosses in the city of Judo. And yeah, he is interesting. He has an interesting way of processing it. He has no concept of people and doesn't want any. He runs people. He will use people. He will beat the shit out of people, or he will find somebody to do it for him. So yeah, that's pretty much why that would be a threat. And he owns the most money in the city. So yeah, that's problematic. So he's always at Daisuke and Jay's throats trying to do stuff in the show. And there are other interesting characters. So Daisuke, without like going into super specifics like the others, but you've got the main characters. But Daisuke's main thing is he always has informants, whether it's street vendors or people that created Jay, people he knew that are part of an underground mob that aren't affiliated with Company Vita, police officers, that sort of thing. So there's always that interplay of all this stuff going on that Daisuke can pull from and get all this information for each case. And that's the benefit of this kind of show, is that there's a lot of different things you can do, and a lot of them either revolve around gun trafficking or fucking with a lot of money or drug use and the mob staples, right? Any seedy ass show you can think of probably's had this sort of setup. And the nice thing is that the city itself, is very beautiful and it looks breathtaking. But when it needs to, it can get this like cool, like they've changed the color scheme. It's like from super blues and grays to the normal city to like dark greens and reds. And to kind of denote like the darker, seedier parts of the world. Like one of the coolest parts was an episode where one of the side characters finds Claire Leonelli in his casino, and they full on show off this casino. But the game, like they're betting on a roulette game, but the roulette game is a game of Russian roulette. So Claire, being an idiot, decides to take up this mystery man on his offer of, hey, why are you the guy not getting shot after 5 or 6 different times? Why are you winning all these? Are you just lucky or dumb? So they give you this like half episode of this casino with all these like bettors and mob bosses and shit, and they're just I don't think they're super like crazy with it, but think of Persona 3 where they're holding guns to their heads and that something bad could happen. So even though I feel that the show is a bit stiff, it still has a lot of like crazy cool things that happen in it, and a lot of it tend to revolve around those like mystery mob connections and shit that happens to all the criminals. Because the main characters are fine, but you're only as good as the villainous side of the campaign, pretty much. The other big deal is how Jay and Daisuke get along. Jay exists because of something known as the Android Regulation Law, which says that androids cannot be in the city, or if they are, they have to be specially designated as such. Jay is one of those designations. They have these episodes where this one's an illegal, this one was brought in to be sold, this one is like fucking with Jay somehow, so Jay has a lot of like political and media backlash against him, that sort of thing. So they play up how you deal with basically the Terminator in this society, and how he doesn't just go on a rampage. So there's a lot that they dig into, and I appreciate that they did that, because considering he's the secondary main character, you can't like avoid that sort of thing. But they also don't obsess over it. The main draw is the criminal side of things, checking out all these cases that they go on. None of them are like super mysterious things. I think in the later part of the series, it's only like 26 episodes. Like they get into a season long storyline, but others are like self-contained crime episodes. So it's really easy to get into and accessible. Like I said before, even 20 years on, I think this show is very gorgeous for its time with the use of CG and character modeling. Like, that crazy anime googly eyes look, right? But even then, even by those standards, you're like, these people are they almost look like dolls, but not in such a super creepy way that they don't look like characters. But sometimes you watch a show and an anime and it feels like even though they have good character models or good design, their character facials and stuff don't really have a lot of definition to them. This is a bit more hyper realistic, and even though like I'd say the noses are a bit off-putting, it's like the facial features in the characters are just like in your face. So I think there's like a big CG component to that too, making them look really good. Or it was just how they designed the characters initially and transferred them to the anime and made it fit with the CG design of the city. Because the city looks amazing. They always have these backdrops of the main hub, this skyscraper looking building, and it just looks fantastic. Or they'll have these like crazy parades or a lot of people walking around, and it looks really good for the time. It does not have the polish that a more recent show would, because it looks a lot slower paced, and that again gets to its detriment. But as far as designs go, it's still something that carries its own weight. I do think, though, that because of that design, and I'll get to the negatives now, the crime drama stuff, the crime action stuff leaves a lot to be desired, because it doesn't feel like it's like those issues that people have with like a Terminator movie or a Spawn movie or a Deadpool movie being turned PG-13. It's that sort of like, this could be a lot darker and disturbing than it actually is, because we're not seeing everything. It's like a PG-13 crime thriller anime. That does not mean it's bad. It just means that for how well written and discussed all this crime stuff is, and they go pretty intriguing with it, it feels like the impact is lost because they don't like go the whole way. Like if you watch Cowboy Bebop now, it's very like grungy and dirty and bleh, despite all the space stuff. If you watch Black Lagoon, they have no reservations about like all the blood, all the swearing, all the violence, all the just seedy bullshit, and all the just bleh that you'd expect. And Gangsta is kind of the same way. This is a sanitized crime thriller kind of thing, so almost kind of like those procedural like Law and Order kinds of things, but with a more mob-esque vibe. I can't like, I'm trying to describe it without like making it sound like it's a bad thing, because it is written and performed very well, and I like going back and watching it, but I can't like disconnect myself from thinking this could be a lot like darker than it should be. But again, it also doesn't like pitfall because of that, because there are some that focus solely on that aspect and forget to actually write themselves very well. I also feel that despite that there being like, you have your first season, which is very episodic, and then you have a second like half season, the next 13 episodes, where there's a storyline that is progressing despite each episode. It doesn't feel like the ending adds up, because it feels like there was an episode missing that connected the dots that I needed to where, even though you talked about this seed being planted and finally coming to fruition right near the end, it felt like they needed like a 3-parter finale. They went for a 2-part finale, and it's fine, I suppose, but again, it feels a bit rushed for what they were going for. They still had the mystery, but I think they spent a little too much time trying to get like a band together kind of vibe. Like, we need to band together to stop whatever's gonna happen, because Daisuke seems to know what's going on, and Jay seems to know what's going on, but like, they focus on the characters. So if you like focusing on character-driven stories, that's pretty nice, but it also feels like a bit of a disconnect from, we have a super impactful climax that could have taken 3 episodes, or at least really capped off what we were going for in that second part of the season. They do allude to everything, though, so it's not like it comes out of thin air. There are some times when you're playing a game or watching a TV show or whatever, where a plot twist comes out of nowhere, and then they try to they try to do it, or they do the horror thing where they show you this mystery and it doesn't happen, and you're like, then they finally tell you, and it just feels kind of deflating. This is more of a middle ground where they could have done more, and they also could have fucked it up. As it is, I think the show is fine, and I think people are going to have a good time. This is one of those things where nobody really talks about this show, and it kind of sucks, because I do enjoy it. It's not anything nobody's ever seen before, but it's done well enough that you can just set yourself and be like, oh, I could get into this. I think I could enjoy this. And this is one of those ones that I always go back to at least once a year and remind myself that, yeah, back then, we didn't have all the anime choices in the world. We just sat there in front of a TV and, oh, hey, look, this stuff from this different culture is here. Like, oh, shit, they have anime on this channel? Oh, shit, it's G4 at midnight, and I'm not watching Toonami or Adult Swim. Let's see what's on G4 this week. That sort of thing. So you had different channels. You couldn't just be like, nah, I'm done. Nah, I'm done. Nah, I'm done. You flip through channels and holy shit, something, and not every time was I graced with a great one, but I think this one holds up decently well because it gives you something familiar. It gives you that crime drama vibe, and it gives you that, oh, we've got a Terminator on our side. That's kind of neat. So it's a good-looking, polished show. It has a little bit of intrigue to it, so it's not going to ruin your day. And I think it should get more respect than it does, and hopefully, people are at least interested to watch it on Funimation, because that's where you can find it. And, it will take you back to, 20 years back in time, if nothing else. So I think people would enjoy it. But that should do it for me. I think this was a bit of a shorter episode, and that's perfectly fine. We got to have these once in a while. But yes, this is all in service to what's coming up next, because next week will be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I will not have Torna, the Golden Country. I will focus mostly on the original game and all of the things in between, because it's just, there's too much stuff in Xenoblade 2 on its own that maybe someday I'll go back and watch or play the Golden Country and get that in there as its own separate supplemental thing. But that'll be next week. 2 weeks from today, it will be Cowboy Bebop. I'm working my way through Cells at Work, which is another show I want to review. It's pretty good. But Bebop is the, oh my god, I gotta watch it again, because I'm going to have a double dose. It's going to be the anime, which I won't shut up about, because I might talk about that for hours if I'm being honest. And then, maybe even the day I finish freaking binge watching it, I will finish the Netflix live action version. And again, I'm trying to keep my mind open. I have no knowledge of any of the actors, any of the visuals. I know some of the stuff that was posted, but I haven't actually looked at it. I'm trying to come into this as completely open as I can, with the understanding that I might hate this show. But hey, I might end up really enjoying it, like we all could. But after that, we get back into video games, and I'm going to talk about Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. I've been working through YouTube watch-throughs of the other couple of games, but I really wanted to start with the original again, so I'm going to double back and rewatch footage of that, because I streamed it a couple years ago and forgot kind of the minutia of each case. So I do want to go into that with a fresher perspective than I would if I was to do it in a month from now. So I will get that done, and I will have probably a lot to say about Phoenix Wright, and hopefully people enjoy it. But again, if anybody enjoys these, I'm grateful. If anybody even clicks on them for a second, I'm grateful, because it means that something I'm doing matters to people. And I've said this over and over, but I think the more that I do it, the more I really feel that I'm giving people something else. Something other than a video game to talk about, or talking about a video game in a different way. And I think it's fun, because I don't really get to do these sorts of things when I'm on a stream or I'm playing the game in a YouTube space. I get to dig deeper, at least a little bit. And sometimes maybe not without, spoiling. But again, I think not spoiling a thing is a good thing sometimes, and have everybody make their own opinions on what they see. But if I can do anything in recommending shows or recommending games to people, then I feel like I'm doing something useful. But that will do it for me today, and I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.